Hey guys, Archer for the Lord here. This is my third video on intermediate chess tactics, and to start off this video, I'd actually like you to analyze this position and give me your opinion of it. So please, pause the video, have yourself a little think, have some calculation time, and it's white to move. I'd like you to try, don't tell me what white's next move is, but try to tell me who you think is better, black or white. Okay, so if you took some time, you may have noticed several things about this position. First of all, the material is even, but white has better control here in the center. Both of his knights are on great squares. He's got a battery along the e-file, and this e5 pawn is severely restricting things for black. Neither of these black knights can get to their ideal squares. For instance, f6 for this knight is covered by the pawn, and d5, the knight was to move here, it would lose a pawn after the exchanges. So definitely here white is better. But it may surprise some of you to know that if you were to put this position into a computer, the computer would probably rate white about 7 points higher than black. And you're thinking, 7 points? What gives here? Well, white has a very strong move. And that move is knight to h4. And all of a sudden it dawns on us that the black queen has 14 squares that it can move to. However, none of these squares is safe. In fact, no matter where it moves, the black queen is checkmated. We're reminded of the words of Admiral Akbar when he said, "It's a trap!" So, nothing can prevent the black queen from being captured next move. And that's what this video is about. It's about checkmating pieces other than your opponent's king. Because, it's not about... Well, I'm going to show some positions in the opening, but you may have looked at this and thought it's about opening traps. It's not. They have their place in the game of chess. But in every game, there will be instances where you can try to set up a trap for your opponent's piece, or where you will have to look out for a trap on your own piece. And in this position, the white player saw the trap and played knight h4, which caused an immediate resignation. So that's the sort of thing we're going to be talking about today. It's about trying to trap the pieces. Now, many of you, I'm sure, have already had positions like that, where the opponent's piece could be trapped. And I'm sure lots of you have had positions similar to this, where you or your opponent made a pawn grab like this. Bishop takes a7. It's not guarded. A pawn is a pawn. Is that right? And the problem with this is that bishop can now become trapped. So after, let's say, rook takes d3, once white recaptures, then the bishop is trapped with b6, and white will just play king to b7 and eventually capture this bishop. The bishop will have to give itself up for a pawn, which will leave black in a very good position to win the game. So this is something I'm sure you guys have seen, and we have to be careful of it in our own games. When you start out, finally realizing that these tactics are in the game. What have I just done here? When you realize these tactics are in the game, then you start looking for them yourself, and you may see other tactics, but you always have to be careful that when you execute a combination, to look at the final position, and try to find out, is there something I've missed? In this position, you may notice, if you are familiar with double attacks with knight forks, you may notice that if black were to play knight takes f5, yes, he's giving up his bishop. His bishop can be captured, but he's also threatening this check here on d4, which would get the white bishop. But this is an unsound combination, because after bishop takes d8, knight d4 check, king comes to d3, and knight captures the bishop, but we have this move, a4. And now we start to feel like the knight may not make it out of this alive. He only has one safe square to go to in this position, and that's knight to a3. And after bishop to e7, once again, only one choice, knight to b1, and after king to c2, that beautiful combination that you played before that won a pawn and got you out of the pin has now lost you the game. And that's why calculation is so important to develop in chess. You have to be able to look forward, and find these moves. Figure out, what are my opponent's counter chances? What is he threatening? What can he do after I do this? This is another trap I'm sure many of you have seen, and this one, is more of a recommendation, because I'm sure you've come upon this position before, and something like this: d4, e6, bishop f4, knight f6, e3. Let's say your opponent throws in this bishop b4 check. Not the best move in the position. After c3 and bishop a5, I'm sure if you're a beginner player, many of you have played b4 before. And after bishop b6, a4 to try and trap the bishop. You know what a trap is. But let's say you're a little bit more crafty. b4 really kind of wrecks your pawn structure. You don't want to be playing that if you don't have to, unless you're going to get the trap for sure. A better move to threaten it is a4. Now, let's say black responds with something like, he casually castles, then play b4. And after bishop b6, we see the purpose of a4 is that they could play a5 as soon as the bishop vacates the square. Otherwise, if we're playing b4, it's way too obvious. Black's going to play a6 for sure, or maybe a5. And after you play a5, bishop a7. And now you've wrecked your pawn structure, you're behind in development, and black has taken over the initiative. And that's no good. Another thing, I want to show you one trap for trapping a piece that comes in the opening. And it's a very old trap. It's in the Lopez. It goes like e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop to a4, and d6. This is the modern Steinitz defense, and the reason why it's called the modern Steinitz defense, there was a Steinitz defense that was basically d6 without throwing in this a6 move, but throwing in the a6 move is actually very helpful because it prevents this move, d4. You may be thinking, how does it prevent that? It looks like a great move, right? Well, not so much. After b5, white really has to play d4 to d5 now in order to keep material balance. Let's say that white doesn't and plays bishop to b3. Now e takes d4, and he can't really take back on d4, because if knight takes d4, then knight takes d4, queen takes d4, and now we're ready for the Noah's Ark trap, c5. And you may think that white can try to get out of it with queen d5, but after bishop e6, he has to give the check here. And now the bishop is no longer blocking the rook. So if the queen goes back, there's our trap, c4. I'm going to show you one more example, and this one's really to illustrate that you're not always going to be able to just have a position, where the piece is trapped. Sometimes you have to trap the piece. In this position, white's up a pawn, but it's going to be taken back here, by the black knight here soon. But white is better here because he can create a trap of his own. F5. Now we already see that this bishop cannot get to his safe zone anymore back here in the last 2 ranks. So he's going to have to stay somewhere on the light squares here. Black can try to play h5 to protect the bishop once it inevitably comes to the square. But after rook to g3, bishop g4, h3. Now we see that this bishop really has nowhere to go. He's going to have to give himself up for a pawn, and even after something like h4, bam, it's ours. So the thing you really want to take away from this position, or from this video, is that trapping pieces happens very often. And you have to be on the lookout for your own pieces so they don't get trapped. But you also have to look out for opportunities to trap your opponent's piece. Anytime a piece cannot get back to this safe zone, the last 2 ranks, there could be a possibility to trap it if you can take away enough of its flight squares. Whatever you do, what we learned in that other opening part about how to move the pawns to trap the bishop, don't wreck your structure trying to trap it. Above all, calculate. Calculation is the key to any tactic. Okay, that's all for this video. Next video I'm going to try to do probably on discoveries. I've been trying to hold that one off because it's really important, but we're going to do discoveries next. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and thanks for watching, YouTube.